Imagine a world where it's perfectly accepted to be different and being able to possess powers and abilities that would normally be considered too dangerous to have in the real world. With great power comes great responsibility and consequence, along with challenges and tests that come with those powers. On today's video, we will be discussing My Hero Academia in all its glory, the heroes, the villains, the action, and the characters as we prepare to dive into a new world filled with new adventures and mysteries next. If you are new to this channel and enjoy what you see, then don't forget to punch that subscribe button and turn on all notifications by clicking on the bell icon to receive new and daily content on your mobile devices, desktops, and services that I provide, along with following me on these social media platforms to stay connected with me at all times. Thank you so much for your continued support. Now let's begin. Now, after an overwhelming demand and a lot of you guys wanting me to check out My Hero Academia, what I recently have done was sat back and enjoyed the entirety of My Hero Academia, beginning with season 1. For the very first time, not knowing anything about this anime, having to go in with a fresh mind and a fresh start, my expectations weren't really that high, as I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. The only story premise I had was that there was this kid who desperately wanted to get into a hero academia, a hero school that he so desperately wanted to become a hero himself, and ultimately learning and having courage and becoming the person that he so desperately wanted to become ever since he was a kid. That was the only information and kind of expectation I had going into this anime, and not knowing what to expect, especially having to have an anime revolve itself around school and classmates and things of that nature. But by the end of this anime, I came out wanting to watch this even more so now than ever before, especially with the developmental aspect of what was shown in this anime. Now, of course, I will only be reviewing season 1, which I am going to touch up on season 2 in another video. Now, immediately from the beginning of My Hero Academia, I quickly gravitated towards Izuku because he was the only person that didn't seem to have a quirk, or in this case, a superpower like his parents, who were both born with superpowers and being 4th generational superpower users, alongside the population as well, that quickly gravitated towards becoming superhumans, which ultimately became the norm in the world. And because of this, because of having these abilities, it also created and spawned high amounts of criminal activity since the inception of superpowers having to be a thing in the norm. And even early on, I was able to sympathize with Midoriya in this case, especially after having to be in school, being picked on since he was a kid, in which right from the beginning we see how Izuku defended one of his friends after being picked on. So to me, I was able to relate to this kid because in some way, shape, or form, each and every single one of us have been through a stage of bullying, and I felt like every single time Izuku was in school, he was bullied in some way, shape, or form because he was one of the only people within the school that didn't seem to have a quirk, or in this case, any sort of superhuman-like ability or trait. And what allowed me to gravitate towards this character that much more was seeing when he went to the doctors with his mom, and the doctor having to tell Izuku in front of his mother that no, he will never at this point when he gets older develop any sort of quirk-like ability, because of the fact that normally if you're born with a quirk, it looks like you only have one joint in your pinky finger, and in this case, we see how Izuku has 2. So early on, he was told by doctors that he wasn't going to amount to anything, and what really stood out to me was how much Izuku admired and was driven by All Might in terms of having an inspirational figure in his life in becoming a superhero just like the person that he idolizes. And to me, that reminded me of a lot of kids nowadays that idolize characters like Superman, Spider-Man, Batman. When you grow up, you idolize these figures in wanting to be just like them, but unlike many of us having to meet Spider-Man, Batman, or Superman, we get to see how Izuku actually ends up meeting All Might in a very bizarre yet awkward situation as Izuku was being overtaken by this monster in the sewer, and then to be saved by your hero, the very person that you've been idolizing since you were a child, was a pretty cool thing. And I love how Izuku wanted to have All Might sign his book, in which we see how All Might already did, and that pretty much built and established the foundation going forward in Izuku, despite not having a quirk, pushing forward in his dreams and one day becoming a hero. But what I really also enjoyed seeing was seeing Izuku's reaction when All Might pretty much converted back to his base form, I would have to say, and just being basically exposed for who he really is. And I really love Midoriya's reaction because he couldn't believe as to who he was seeing. He kept insinuating that All Might was a person that was very brave and he always had a smile on his face, and come to find out that All Might reveals that, yeah, behind that smiley face of his is a very frightened person because he actually has respiratory damage. And I really love how All Might went in depth with pretty much telling Izuku about you can't really become a hero without a quirk. So, and that pretty much damaged his hopes and dreams right there in having your hero tell you, look, without any special abilities or powers, you're pretty much essentially useless. However, just because you don't have a quirk doesn't mean that you can't become a hero, and I personally felt that after a while, seeing how All Might was helpless and fighting the same sewer monster that he did prior, we see how Izuku actually came to the save of one of the bullies that was pretty much harassing him in school and making fun of him and the fact he doesn't have a quirk and how he's never going to make it in becoming a superhero. Now seeing Izuku actually do something out of the norm and stepping in a fight in which he never really belonged in the first place made me gravitate towards him that much more as being a brave individual, that knowing the fact that even though without any superpowers, he still did what he needed to do in order to prove himself and being that much more of a hero than anybody else. Which was why eventually, after stopping the sludge monster, All Might actually confronted Izuku in explaining to him about the origins of his power and wanting to pass this ability down to him, in which we never really knew about quirk passing before until All Might mentioned that his secret power was in fact something called One for All, and this power and ability continues to grow after an X amount of time after being passed down from person to person. And this reminded me so much of the classic Jean-Claude Van Damme films and having to get stronger and having to train constantly, because that's what All Might made Izuku do, is train in trying to allow his body to grow, especially if he was going to inherit All Might's powers. And everything All Might had done for Izuku actually came in handy as the day of the exam came about and Izuku had 0 points as he was going up against various other individuals that had amazing quirk-like abilities and powers. And still in the end, after receiving 0 points, still managing to put his own life in the risk of helping somebody else that allowed him to ultimately pass the exam by the end. That was a pretty cool thing, and I really do love the chemistry between All Might and Izuku because it really does resonate, and it really goes to show how much this kid cares in excelling in life and becoming a hero, that he's willing to put everything and anything on the line just to prove a point. Oh, and by the way, Kacchan and Deku remind me so much of Goku and Vegeta. You know, Shonen Jump's traditional hero and anti-hero like characters. I mean, we always have characters that more or less signify having rivals, and these two are no exception of that, and I really did enjoy that in this season. But what I also grew to enjoy was Deku versus Kacchan, because we get to see how Deku basically idolized Kacchan when they were kids, and Kacchan has this very egotistical mindset to where he feels as if he's the best, and it personally reminded me of Vegeta during the Saiyan and Namek saga when he was pretty much full of his own hype. And I really enjoyed how Kacchan was basically in pursuit of Deku during episode 7 of My Hero Academia, and I really enjoyed their battle because it brought me back to the traditional rivalry that many other heroes had in other animes. And I really did enjoy how Deku stood up against Kacchan after having to be bullied by him, harassed by him ever since they were kids, going into school. So Deku had been through a lot by having to take Kacchan's BS over the years, and I really did enjoy how Deku for once actually stood up to him and studying him, studying his movements, and Kacchan not knowing a thing and allowing his raw emotions to ultimately get the best of him. And that's what I really enjoyed about My Hero Academia Season 1. But alongside them, seeing the unknown arrive I think was pretty cool, and I really gravitated towards Eraserhead because his ability in canceling out your quirk just by looking at you was pretty cool. And when he would wrap you up with those bands, he could pretty much take you down, as he was foddering so many of the villains that pretty much came crashing on in once the students were about to perform somewhat of a task in a rescue mission. We saw how the unknown Unknown pretty much arrived and where they were at, All Might wasn't even there because he was unaware as to, you know, even the events taking place of the villains having to invade, because he pretty much burnt out on his powers and using it too much. And I really did enjoy how All Might, for the most part of the show, was acting as if the teaching role was very difficult, even though he was teaching Midoriya alongside of the way of trying to become a better hero. I really did enjoy the concept of what My Hero Academia had to offer, especially for Season 1. Not even attributing Season 2 yet, but going into Season 3, my expectations are so high, considering the fact that this is only going to be a general synopsis of Season 1 for me. And I really did enjoy so much of this anime's aspect, from the score to the characters, and I feel like the relation and everything was so consistent that it allowed you to gravitate towards so many characters that much more. And my all-time favorite anime will always be Dragon Ball, but this is definitely on my top 10 list, as is many other animes that I've previously watched, such as Attack on Titan, Death Note. I think My Hero Academia definitely fits the bill in being one of the best all-time animes that I've seen in quite some time, but I really did enjoy the overall build-up and development of so many of these characters that I felt like Season 1 was more or less a development-like arc in trying to allow all the characters to get to know each other and develop and grow as heroes. And to me, it brought me back to Harry Potter in a weird way, with Hermione, with Harry, with Ronald Weasley, and that's what this brought me back to, because we get to see how Deku ultimately starts making friends with pretty much the same people, a girl, a guy, and that's what it brought me back to. And then it also felt Harry Potter-esque because of the teachers and the environment, being in this school, and how badly, you know, Deku wanted to be a part of the Hero Academia. It was amazing, and considering the fact that he was born without a quirk, that meant so much more to him as an individual, because he went through so much just to get where he was at, and I really did grow to appreciate that and ultimately grow to like him as a whole because of what he had to offer. Now, as the show progressed, I really did enjoy how the Unknown arrived, and among that selected group of individuals, we only had a handful that were significantly strong, because we saw how Eraserhead was able to cast out other people's quirks and being able to foderize them completely. Even the kids, after having to be separated within the training zone, they were able to outpace and outmaneuver and outmatch some of the other criminals that were able to assist the Unknown in having to come there to stop All Might. So I felt as if the typical humans that were playing the role of the average criminals were okay, even though they got completely fodderized by even the students. What I really grew to enjoy was seeing Eraserhead, who was fodderizing everybody else that managed to step in front of him, get beat down by one of the main individuals there, which in fact the strongest individual among the three having to be showcased there was an individual called Nomu, who in fact is a shock absorption artificial human villain. And I really did enjoy how he was able to take Deku's All Might attack and completely be unfazed. And you would think, assumingly, that once All Might were to arrive, that Kiroki and Shigaraki were actually going to fall by the hands of All Might. But at first, when All Might fought Namu, when All Might went against Nomu, it was actually very interesting, because none of All Might's attacks were able to even get by Nomu's defenses, as he was a shock absorption like villain who was able to take the punishment of any individual having to dish out anything towards his direction. So essentially, for the first time, we get to see how the villains had the upper hand on All Might, in which I loved how Nomu was actually able to squeeze out the weaknesses in All Might by being able to grab All Might and squeezing him like a banana. And I've noticed how when Nomu was squeezing him, he was actually squeezing All Might on one of his sides where he was mostly hurt when he was explaining to Deku about the origins of his power, and that pretty much exposed his weakness until we saw Shota and Kacchan come and make the save and saving All Might at that given point. Now again, Shota and Kacchan are two of the most powerful quirk users there, which I really do enjoy. As I said before, I wasn't really a big fan of Kacchan in this entire season because he played the bully role on Deku in more or less being the oppressor and more or less being the individual that always used to look down on someone like Deku, picking on him since he was a kid just because Deku never had a quirk and he did. But in the end, even after having to defy All Might and having to leave the facility for him to handle the villains by himself, Deku returns, and despite having to be at a disadvantage, Kacchan and Shota also arrive in assisting All Might in fighting these villains, even though Nomu is the strongest individual there, alongside with the assistance of Kirogiri and Shigaraki, with of course All Might having to battle Nomu Nomu, and that was a really intense fight because we got to see how weak All Might has become in running out of time, in doing everything he could at full power to blow away Nomu. So as that happened, I really loved the intense showdown between the last two villains and All Might, and in the end, even though I have not watched season 2 yet, it was very obvious in the end that the two villains were going to return and having to reform and talk to a mysterious person behind the screen, in having the League of Darkness, the League of Villains, reform and restructure, and taking the time to have learned the weaknesses of All Might, and even exposing Deku as being one of the students that, if it were not for him, they could have easily have killed All Might. I really grew to enjoy how everything pieced together in such a traditional villain-esque kind of way that it allowed me to anticipate more of My Hero Academia than ever before, because we got to see how the villains weren't captured or killed, but more or less weakened to the state of recovery to where they can eventually come back and giving All Might the fight that he so desperately craves. And by the very end, what I really got out of this anime was gaining the trust of your peers, having to learning what it's like to be brave, and gaining enough courage to stand up against opposition, even if the opposition just so happens to be much mightier and more superior than you are as an individual. Never backing down from a challenge was the main objective of season 1 in developmental aspects from the students, but also seeing that how the students by the end were able to be courageous enough in facing off against people that were essentially even more powerful than they were, and that's what it takes to make a hero. But one of the many other reasons as to why I gravitated towards this anime was because My Hero Academia season 1 reminded me so much of Harry Potter, and hear me out on this. Number 1, we have Deku, who just so happens to be Harry, meeting two other people in his school, which happen to be a male and female, just like Hermione and Ron, and the students were actually favored by the teachers. As an example, Harry Potter was always favored by some of the other teachers, especially Dumbledore. Dumbledore in this case having to be All Might, as Harry played the role of Deku. Now also we get to see how some of the other students like Kacchan reminded me so much of Draco Malfoy. Draco Malfoy having to play the role of the bully, the person that never liked Harry to begin with, as seen in the anime, until of course they were forced to work together. So we have Harry, we have Malfoy, we have Deku, and we have Kacchan. So as I was watching this anime, this brought me back to Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone and the Chamber of Secrets and the Order of the Phoenix. It reminded me so much of that, because also looking at Deku and how desperately he wanted to go into UA, it was the same as Harry Potter desperately wanting to go to Hogwarts. So everything made sense in its execution and utilization, which is why I personally really enjoyed My Hero Academia season 1. So in the end, guys, let me know what you all think down in the comment section below. Also, what I happened to have done was checked out both the dub and the sub. It took me quite some time to watch both, but I really also did enjoy the dubbed version, as of course our friendly neighborhood Prince of the Saiyans, that being Christopher Sabat, just so happens to play the role of All Might. And there are lots of references to Dragon Ball Z, the fight sequences. We get to see how so many references are made to power and having to grow in terms of being an individual, and that's another reason why I gravitated towards this anime so much, was seeing the resemblance in Dragon Ball Z to me as a fan, alongside many other things. So I will be reviewing My Hero Academia Season 2, alongside giving out my weekly review for My Hero Academia Season 3, so make sure you guys tune back onto the channel, and let me know your overall thoughts as to who you guys favor in My Hero Academia. I have grown to like so many characters. So far, I don't like Kacchan, just because in season 1 he's made out to be such a bully and an asshole towards Deku, but of course I have noticed from a lot of people in telling me that he ultimately grows to become a hero in working alongside Deku, so maybe his development is going to change in season 2 since I haven't seen it yet. But in season 1, Kacchan reminded me so much of your traditional rival who is always jealous and envious of the other person, so I really did enjoy that for the most part. However, there are so many things that you can look back on in My Hero Academia Season 1 to appreciate, and for me, if I were you, if you've never seen My Hero Academia, check it out, the dubbed or the subbed, it doesn't really matter. I think that you will more or less enjoy both, but if you guys want to watch it in English, that's fine too, because I think that you will really get a good kick out of this in seeing the execution of the voice acting and seeing the visual effects and seeing the storytelling be consistent, which I really did enjoy. It was a really fun anime, and I cannot wait to watch Season 2 and of course Season 3, but let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching. If of course you guys are new to this channel, hit that subscribe button, guys. More importantly, make sure you guys turn on all notifications, that way you guys do get my video when whenever a brand new video is posted onto this channel. It's very important that you guys do so. Tune back in for more, and I'll be seeing you all down in the comment section below. Have a great day, everybody. Cue my outro, bitch.